Take a look at any map of our planet, and one thing stands out immediately: there's water everywhere. While we've mapped the surface of the oceans, which allows us to create fairly accurate maps, it's a different story when it comes to exploring what lies beneath. Sure, we've ventured into the oceans, but there's a big difference between simply exploring and fully mapping them out. So when unexpected discoveries are made underwater, we can't help but be captivated, or even downright horrified, by what we find. With that in mind, let's dive into 20 of the scariest underwater discoveries yet. Number 20. Ice Fingers of Doom. So, I gave you a rather heartwarming and endearing introduction about the ocean. Let's counter that with the cold chill of death for the first point. No, really, things are about to get cold in here, so bundle up. The phenomenon I'm talking about right now is that of brinicles, which are known as icy fingers that form in cold water areas like the Antarctic. These brinicles are so chilling that they're often called the fingers of death by those who study them, and for good reason. Technically, this has been known about since the 1960s, but it wasn't until much later that they were not only caught on camera but seen growing in real time. They've been known to spread slowly but relentlessly across the seafloor, reaching out like a deadly frost. It's definitely worthy of the horror movie feeling that the video is trying to convey. A brinicle is formed when the floating sea ice cracks and leaks out the saline water solution into the open ocean below. Since the brine is heavier than the water around it, it sinks down toward the ocean floor, freezing the relatively fresh water it comes into contact with. The further down it goes, the more the fingers branch out and form. Oh, and any creature that gets caught in the way of the brinicles? Well, they simply get frozen in place and die. Number 19. Diving Bell Spider. If you've been with us for a long time here, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of spiders. In fact, I'll tell you with a straight face that they absolutely suck, and as a result, I don't really want to talk about them any more than I have to. But in the case of the diving bell spider, it has to be talked about because it's both a unique and horrifying part of the ocean. You see, the diving bell spider is an air-breathing spider, and yet, it's the only spider in the world that lives entirely underwater. That shouldn't be possible, right? Because it breathes air, and you can't breathe air through the water, right? That's where the name of the spider comes into play. It has the ability to create an air bubble around itself like a diving bell, which creates a pocket of air for it to breathe. A very clever trick, wouldn't you say? But that, too, leaves many questions. Mainly, a diving bell or an air bubble should have limits in how much air it can contain before the spider within would have to surface, right? At first, that's what many thought about this spider. But now we know that the bubble around the spider actually acts like a gill. Much like a fish, it extracts what it needs from the water in order to breathe. The only time it needs to go to the surface is for a quick dash to get a resupply of air, but it only needs to do that about once a day. One can only wonder how this spider was able to evolve to do such a feat. Number 18. Marine Flatworm. Now here's one that's going to surprise you, as well as terrify you. I'm talking to you now about the marine flatworm. Yes, there are worms that live in the waters of the world, and you should be very, very scared of them. Firstly, because they're known to be large, depending on their species. But secondly, they can be very aggressive and aren't afraid to show off their power in order to get prey. These flatworms have a unique and unsettling way of moving, almost gliding over the sea floor in search of their next meal. They use tiny cilia on their undersides, creating a smooth, slithering movement that's both mesmerizing and chilling. Case in point, in this video you're going to see a marine flatworm taking on a crab, and the worm is going to win. Flatworms don't use traditional biting or clawing methods. Instead, they rely on their powerful, muscular bodies to engulf and suffocate their prey. Notice how it uses its large body to cover up the crab until the crab is subdued. When people saw this video, they were, needless to say, surprised because they didn't think a worm could actually do that. But they can, and it's horrifying. Number 17. The Silfur Crack. Now, I wouldn't be lying by telling you that the Silfur Crack is one of the most important places in the ocean, mainly because it's a rift between the continental plates that's getting bigger every single year. You may recall that there are several tectonic plates that help make up the Earth. Well, they're not exactly fused together as you might think, and thus, things like the Silfur Crack are born when those plates start separating. What makes Silfur particularly special is that it's one of the few places in the world where you can dive directly between two tectonic plates, the North American and Eurasian plates, which are gradually drifting apart. Divers describe the experience as surreal because, as they descend, they can actually touch two continents simultaneously. The water here is also exceptionally clear, with visibility that often extends over 100 meters, giving divers a stunning view of the geological features and vibrant aquatic life. While it's bad in the overall geological sense, at present it's not causing much damage. Due to that, the crack is actually a place that people like to dive into because there's unique life down there. The Silfur Crack is located in Iceland, if you'd like to go and see this fascinating spot for yourself. Number 16. Atlantic Ocean Manganese Nodules. Now here's a set of words that seem to be strung together randomly, wouldn't you say? Atlantic Ocean Manganese nodules. Let's set the scene, though, because this is actually really interesting. The RV San, a German research ship, was several hundred miles east of Barbados when a mesh net meant to capture marine life instead brought up balls of manganese, or that were bigger than softballs. That's definitely not something you'd expect to find on the seafloor. In fact, many of the team members were surprised because, while balls of or have been found like this on land, they're rarely seen in the depths of the ocean. But there's a twist here. Scientists were either wrong or not telling the whole story because these kinds of or balls have actually been found in the ocean before, typically in the Pacific Ocean. These metal lumps, which often look like pancakes, are formed from layer upon layer of metal or that slowly crystallizes around a core. So, the strange thing here is that the ones found near Barbados were spherical in shape and about the size of softballs or even larger. Plus, they were found around 18,000 feet below sea level. Due to all these unusual factors, nobody knows where these particular manganese nodules came from or why they formed in such a different way than others discovered before. It also goes to reason that if they can form as spheres or pancakes, they could potentially take on other shapes as well, right? Now it's time for today's topic. Near the coast of Miami, a group of recreational divers made a shocking discovery while exploring the seabed. As they ventured deeper, their flashlights illuminated a large, rusted shipping container resting on the ocean floor. Intrigued by its unusual location, they swam closer and noticed symbols indicating potential hazards. Realizing the container didn't belong in these waters, the divers immediately surfaced and contacted the authorities. Within hours, a team of police and Coast Guard officials arrived, sending a specialized dive squad down to investigate. Carefully opening the container, they uncovered a disturbing stash: crates filled with illegal substances, high-powered firearms, and ammunition. The discovery pointed to an organized operation, likely linked to smuggling activities. Authorities speculated that this container may have been jettisoned by a cargo ship attempting to evade capture. With Miami's port being one of the busiest in the U.S., the container was likely dropped to avoid detection by customs or Coast Guard patrols. The find has raised questions about how many other hidden containers might lie undetected on the ocean floor, filled with contraband abandoned by smugglers to escape law enforcement. This discovery serves as a reminder of the hidden dangers lurking beneath the waves, just out of sight. Number 15. Devil Scorpion Fish. Can I just note that this is a very menacing name for a fish? I mean, if you think about it, it's called the devil scorpion, as in, devil and scorpion, but it's a fish, as if the fish part is meant to ignore the first two words that came before it. That's not really how things work. Also known as the false stonefish, this is a very tricky bottom-dwelling creature of the ocean. Its camouflage is nearly perfect. It can mimic the appearance of rocks and coral so convincingly that even experienced divers might swim right by it without noticing. The devil scorpion fish remains almost motionless for hours, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. When prey comes within range, it doesn't hesitate, snapping forward with lightning speed and injecting venom that can cause intense pain, swelling, and even temporary paralysis. It lies at the bottom of the seabed, blending into the environment so that when their prey passes above them, they can sting them with their poisonous spine. Yes, like the stonefish, they have very poisonous appendages that they're not afraid to use. Thankfully, you yourself likely won't have to come across them. But then again, if they were nearby when you swam, you likely wouldn't even notice them anyway. Number 14. Spider Crab Army. This is the universe punishing us for saying that spiders suck, now isn't it? Because we went from talking about spiders to talking about spider crab. Thankfully, though, the spider crab species is not as evil as spiders are, but they can absolutely make an impression if you're viewing them at the right time. Just ask the BBC if you don't believe me, because when they were filming their documentary series Blue Planet 2, they were able to capture a shot of a literal army of spider crabs emerging from the depths of the ocean in order to protect themselves from predators. Now, just to be clear, I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of crabs, according to the camera crew. The cameras were also able to capture them shedding their shells in unison. It was quite the sight, and if you're curious, the spider crab species sheds their shells at key points in their lives so they can grow even bigger ones. They need only a few days to grow them back, but they stick together so that it's harder to get one of them while they're also vulnerable. That being said, there are some creatures that aren't afraid to take advantage of the situation. For example, the film crew caught a stingray swooping down and grabbing some of the crabs. The crabs did try to fight it off, but it wasn't exactly something they could handle. It just goes to show you that strength in numbers isn't always enough, and even an army can fall in the face of a foe that is much stronger. Number 13. Underwater crop circles. If there's one thing in the world that'll definitely get people talking, it's seeing indents in things that shouldn't be there and clearly don't have a human origin. One of these events is obviously that of crop circles, which have been widely tied to aliens over the years. But what if I told you that there were underwater crop circles as well? In 1995, divers noticed a beautiful, strange circular pattern on the seafloor off Japan, and soon after, more circles were discovered nearby. These weren't the last time that they were discovered either, and the more these underwater crop circles appeared, the more people wondered what in the world was going on. In fact, it was over a decade since the first underwater crop circles were discovered that the answer finally emerged about what was making them, or more accurately, who was making them. As it would turn out, to the shock of many, the culprit was a male puffer fish. Yeah, it's not what you were expecting, and you're not alone in that. In fact, it wasn't just any puffer fish. It was a newly discovered species of puffer fish with a unique mating ritual. That's right, the males try to attract females by making these art designs on the seafloor. Males laboriously flap their fins as they swim along the seafloor, resulting in disrupted sediment and amazing circular patterns. The really cool thing here is that the species of puffer fish itself is only about 5 inches long, but when the end result of its art is completed, it spans a diameter of 7 feet. That's a lot of work and effort put into a mating ritual, but if the female enjoys the art, they will mate. Here's hoping all those male puffer fish have the best of luck. Number 12. Lokis Castle. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, between Greenland and Norway, scientists found microorganisms in 2016 that they called a missing link, connecting the simple cells that first populated Earth to the complex cellular life that emerged roughly 2 billion years ago. They called this microbe Loki, and as you can imagine, it got a lot of people talking. These organisms were actually found in a part of a frozen seabed near a hydrothermal vent, places that you would think life wouldn't even try to survive in. But guess what? Life finds a way. Life finds a way to live in those vents and around them, despite the inhospitable conditions that other creatures of the deep would struggle with. By their own admission, the team that found Loki were just hoping to get some new clues about the original cells that formed life on the planet and those that evolved from it. But they apparently got a whole lot more than they bargained for in terms of spectacular data. There's obviously still a lot to learn about the origins of life, even if Loki is indeed the missing link. But once again, we can see how the ocean is so important to everything on this planet, because even if the land doesn't contain the answers that we seek, perhaps the ocean does. Number 11. Suruga Bay Creature. You might think that at this point in time, with all of our creative powers and technology, we'd know every fish that lives in the sea and ocean. But you'd be very wrong. To prove this, in 2021, a new fish was discovered in Japan's waters, known as the Suruga Bay Creature. The fish is thought to be an apex predator in the ecosystem of Suruga Bay, and it's documented to be about 3 feet long, which is a pretty big fish indeed. Researchers were particularly struck by its unique body structure, adapted for life in the deep, dark waters, with features that hinted at a highly efficient hunting style. So much so, the team affectionately gave it the nickname Yokozuna, after a sumo wrestler's highest rank and ultimate goal, as they felt it was the biggest of its kind. The Suruga Bay depths are actually one of the biggest mystery spots of the entire ocean, as nobody really knows everything that lives down there due to how deep it is. The harsh, low-visibility environment makes exploration challenging, leaving scientists to wonder what other massive or unique species could still be lurking undetected. Back in 2016, an attempt was made to catch some fish in the bay, and 4 new species of fish were found. As you can see, while we do know a lot about the ocean and its depths, there are still many things left to be discovered and researched. Number 10. Antira Mechanism. One of the things that often amazes people about the ancient world is the simple fact that civilizations like the Romans, Egyptians, Chinese, Japanese, and Greeks were far more advanced than one might expect. They had access to tools and technologies that would even impress today. A great example of this is the Antira Mechanism, often described as an ancient computer, and it's still very much a mystery to this day. The device was found in a shipwreck back in 1901, and for over 120 years now, scientists have been trying to figure out how the Greeks not only constructed it, but also how they knew to make it work as it did. In case you're not familiar, the Antira Mechanism was allegedly used by Greek sailors to understand solar movements, predict eclipses, and forecast other astronomical events. Impressive as that is, it leaves the question, how did they know how to do all of this and turn it into an analog computer? That's what people have struggled to understand for years. It didn't help that only a third of the mechanism survived when it was found, but many are trying to recreate it now to learn more. In fact, arguably the first complete model of the Antira Mechanism was said to have been recreated as of last year, though there's still some debate about that one. All in all, the fact that this device exists in the first place is enough to make people wonder what else ancient civilizations might have created back in the day. Number 9. The Lancet Fish. There are times when you look at a creature and think, yeah, that thing's pretty freaky. The Lancet Fish is definitely one of those that fits that description to a T. Just look at its head, and you'll see all the horror you could ever need, with its open mouth and mighty fangs. The fact that these fangs point backward doesn't help things either. Adding to its unsettling appearance, it has a translucent, scaleless body, making it look even more ghostly as it glides through the deep. If you really want to deep dive into what they are, these fish are actually 7 feet long, which makes them fierce predators when you combine that size with that mouth. Equally interesting and creepy is that lancet fish are rare creatures that have both male and female reproductive organs simultaneously. Scientists aren't entirely sure how their reproduction works, but it clearly does, as these fish are still around. They're also known to be relentless eaters. In fact, they'll rip apart prey even when they aren't particularly hungry, and then worry about digesting it later. Finally, and equally horrifying, they're also cannibals. That's right, they'll eat their own kind without a second thought. Now, if that doesn't freak you out, what will? Number 8. Underwater river. Hearing about a river isn't mysterious at all, but when that river is actually underwater, it becomes a whole different story. These submarine channels were almost completely unknown until the 1980s, when sonar mapping of the seafloor began to reveal them. Not only do these rivers have defined pathways, but they even exhibit currents strong enough to carry sediment, shaping the landscape of the seafloor just as surface rivers carve valleys and canyons. Many extend out into the ocean from the mouths of major rivers like the Amazon and the Congo, following tortuous routes across thick sediment on the seafloor. Some underwater rivers are so powerful that they can actually influence marine ecosystems, bringing nutrients to areas that might otherwise be barren. They behave just like you'd expect a river to, including having banks and carving out rock faces. In fact, a canyon in California was created by an underwater river. There are also underwater rivers in places like Mexico that are actually toxic due to various chemicals in their flow. All in all, we still have a lot more to learn about the waters of our world, and that includes understanding the different forms that water can take below the surface. Number 7. Octopus Nursery. Now, I'm not sure the Beatles had this in mind when they sang about an octopus's garden, but this is definitely something worthy of a song. While mapping California's Monterey Bay, scientists stumbled upon something they never expected. Over 1,000 octopuses gathered in one area, preparing to give birth to their offspring. This discovery marked one of the largest gatherings of octopuses ever recorded, sparking immediate curiosity among researchers. Many of these octopuses were observed carefully protecting clusters of eggs, each mother clutching her own precious future generations. The unusual sight of such a high-density congregation led scientists to question whether the location held some special significance, possibly due to the warmer waters emitted by the volcanic rocks. While groups of octopuses had been seen before, it was never on this scale, and the footage of the event is breathtaking, to say the least. There were about 3 rivers flowing into this one crew member noted, referring to the 3 rivers of octopuses converging on a formation of volcanic rock. Clearly, there's still much more to learn about certain sea creatures and their behaviors in the ocean. Number 6. 13,000-year-old skull. Finding human remains can be a chilling experience, but for this particular skull, which dates back over 13,000 years, it was an important discovery. Found in a Mexican cave, the skull is believed to belong to a teenager from that era. Its significance lies not just in its age but in the fact that it's one of the oldest and most intact skulls ever found in the Western Hemisphere. The condition of the skull has allowed researchers to extract invaluable DNA samples, providing clues about the genetic makeup of ancient populations. From these samples, scientists can track migration patterns and learn how early humans adapted to changing climates and landscapes. Additionally, the cave where it was found likely served as a shelter, giving insights into the daily lives and survival strategies of these early inhabitants. This skull could even reveal dietary habits based on analysis of bone composition, helping piece together the history of ancient diets in the region. This is crucial because intact remains allow scientists to learn more from them. The skull could also help answer questions about the origins of life in the Western Hemisphere as a whole. Number 5. Gom Ns Base Jumping. We're going to make this very clear right from the start. The man I'm about to talk about, Gom Ns, is a professional diver, and thus this stunt is not to be attempted unless you're on his skill level. In the Bahamas, there's an entity known as Dean's Blue Hole. It's a sinkhole that the ocean filled up, and it's 202 feet deep. This makes it a perfect place for divers, both those who wear gear to get down into the hole and those like this man who decided that gear wasn't necessary at all. These free divers literally dive into the deepest of waters with nothing but a single breath, taking many risks while they're diving down. For this particular dive, he's going to go into the blue hole and then base jump down it, eventually coming back up. The footage that was recorded is breathtaking, I'll give him that, but you also know that this man had to have the utmost confidence in himself to even attempt something like this. All it would have taken was one thing to go wrong, and he would have been absolutely dead. Number 4. Gumboot Kitan. Now, you might not know about the Gumboot Kitan, but you should take note of them because they're a very unique creature, even if it doesn't look like they're actually alive. Chitons have a mantle, a muscular foot for locomotion, and a radula for eating. Their radula, or rasping tongue, is made up of many tooth-like structures capped with magnetite, an element with enough magnetic power to pick up these chitons with a magnet. This magnetic property has fascinated researchers, who are studying it to understand how this unusual mineralization occurs in a living organism. It's something you definitely should try if you ever find one. The chiton's bodies are also incredibly resilient, allowing them to cling tightly to rocky surfaces even in rough ocean currents. In fact, the Gumboot Kitan is one of many chitons harvested and eaten in certain countries. They're even seen as a delicacy by some. Now, I'm fine with not eating it, though it's not really my cup of tea. Number 3. San Jose. Allow me now to tell you the story of the San Jose, a tale that might be horrifying to you if your family was originally from Spain a couple of hundred years back. You see, the ship was part of the Spanish fleet sent to the west to gather valuables for the crown and the war it was fighting at the time. The San Jose was loaded with gold, silver, and jewels, all mined from South America and destined to fill the royal coffers. But tragedy struck when a British fleet attacked the convoy, aiming to intercept its precious cargo. A fierce battle ensued, and the San Jose was struck, eventually sinking off the coast of Cartagena, Colombia. For centuries, its final resting place remained a mystery, with treasure hunters and historians alike searching for clues. But many of the ships, like the San Jose, sank into the depths and lost a lot of treasure in the process. But how much treasure, you ask? Well, the ship sank in 1708, and when it was found in 2015, it was estimated to have about $17 billion worth of treasure on board. Billion with a B. That's enough to make your jaw drop, isn't it? Number 2. Giant ice boulders. If I'm being honest, ice is something to fear when in the right condition. You don't want ice on the road as you drive. You don't want it on the sidewalk when you walk. And who here actually likes hail? That stuff hurts. But you wouldn't need to fear something like a giant ice boulder, right? You already know the answer to that question. Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore in Michigan was the location where these entities were discovered. They were apparently the size of beach balls when they were found. Interestingly, as these ice boulders are tossed and rolled by waves and wind, they take on smoother, more rounded shapes, giving them an almost otherworldly appearance. Some of them even reach sizes comparable to exercise balls, and it's no wonder they've become a sight to behold for curious visitors. Park Ranger Amy Lipscomb explained that the boulders formed when chunks of ice broke away from large sheets of ice on the lake. Over time, more layers of ice are added to the chunks, causing them to grow in size. It's very impressive, but it's also something I wouldn't want to get hit with. Number 1. Apollo 11 engines. Now honestly, finding an engine in the ocean isn't all that horrifying. The real shocking part is who actually found them. You see, when a spaceship takes off, there are parts of it that break away upon liftoff so that other stages of the craft can proceed. That means those parts fall down, which can be dangerous. So, NASA and other space agencies do their best to launch over the ocean to ensure that people aren't harmed as parts fly off. When the Apollo 11 mission took off, its engines were among the parts that fell into the ocean, among other things, of course. The problem was that NASA couldn't find them after the successful mission, so they remained in the ocean until 2013. And guess who found them? Jeff Bezos. That's right, the guy who runs Amazon and all that. He made it happen, and now the engines are not only verified as the original engines, but they're also on display in a museum. And that wraps up our journey through the depths of the ocean and the fascinating discoveries hiding below. Which of these finds do you think is the most intriguing? And do you believe there are still unique, or even terrifying, things waiting to be uncovered in the deep? Will we ever truly explore all of its waters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out other cool videos popping up on your screen, and I'll catch you next time.